All right. Well, welcome everybody. I will call the economic development meeting to order now. The first thing on the agenda is, well, first off, this is going to be I believe, probably my last economic development meeting of my council in tenure. So I'd like to thank, obviously, my committee and the staff for all the great work. This is a very exciting meeting for me because we're going to be discussing the Stocksdale redevelopment with our wonderful partners from, Partners Economic Solutions. Revitalization of downtown was part of my platform and part of the platform of many of the candidates up for the election this year. So I hope they're watching and become informed in what the long-term strategy is for this really key piece of property. So that being said, I will turn it over to staff and Partners for Economic Solutions.
Thank you, Chairman Yingling. We're joined today by Anita Morrison and Abby Ferretti from Partners for Economic Solutions. It's been a long time since we've had the pleasure of seeing them. So I think, Abby, you have a brief presentation, and I think then, Ben, we're just going to open up to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Barb. Yes, we're just going to go through sort of a summary of the report for those folks who haven't read it in a long time or whose eyes glazed over when they did read it. So again, as everybody mentioned, this is a site here. As you can see on the first slide, this is the subject site, the former Scottsdale property, and Partners for Economic Solutions is run by myself, Abigail Ferretti, and Anita Morrison, who's here in turquoise on the slide as well. And we really want to open it up to Q&A at the end of the presentation, but can go back to any of the slides or points or questions that any folks have later. So thanks for that. So again, I'm joined by Anita Morrison, but we also had great assistance from Mazer Consulting, and they did part of the site conditions analysis and report. I think today we're really going to focus on the work that Anita and I did, so we didn't want to spend any more of their budget, but they did do considerable time preparing sort of where the site itself was and site characteristics and just some baseline information that you need beyond a standard survey that you would use as you move forward with the solicitation of redevelopment. So it's important to remember that that work is also incorporated in this process. So again, our work begins really with starting with looking at the existing, what's happening on the ground. So we take a moment and we step back and we say, what are the conditions in the marketplace? And then we profile that by looking at demographics, and we look at the land use types and those conditions. And we consider the market as it is today and how it'll be met. For our purposes, we started this work prior to the pandemic. We were hired literally in the midst of the pandemic, and then we had to sort of adjust because of the pandemic. So today I'll be representing sort of a bit of what's happened in the report and then what's happened since the time that we published that report in terms of those market conditions. But we do take those conditions at one point in time and say, what's financially viable for this site? And if I were a private developer and I put that hat on, what would we think could happen? And so that's our third step in the analysis. And then we capture all of that in a site characterization report, which we have a draft of that we presented to you, but it has some missing pieces because, like I said, COVID did significantly impact this entire process, and we had to put a pause on it. So for our analysis, we looked at three main land use options. Now, these options came out of discussions with you, the client, based on understanding of your community, but they were also based on our read of what was happening in the marketplace and where there might be opportunities. So we did not limit ourselves based on zoning or what had previously been on the site. There's assumption that if remediation was necessary or those types of steps, that those would be undertaken or the zoning would be changed to allow for these options. So broadly based, we looked at multifamily, which was a residential, rental, or for sale option. And that was really targeting the audience of professionals, empty nesters, and students. We looked at hospitality. We thought about McDaniel College, its impact on the community, the guests, but also out of area visitors for other types of tourism that you have in the community. And then we looked at the option of adding retail to any of those components because this is a main street. And I like to make this really important. This is almost your corner of Main and Main. This is a really important site. I think it was very wise of you as a community and as the leaders of this city for Westminster to go out there and purchase this site. You may have spent a lot of money on it, but I think it was a good investment because it's strategic in terms of what's going to happen to your downtown, not just in the next 5 years, but in 10 to 20 years. This is going to be a site that you're going to look back on this decision and hopefully be pleased that you were able to have the highest and best use that you could get based on your intervention. So talking about those demographics, and this was laid out, we looked at the population in the city of Westminster, but we also looked at a broader area. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you see the map. This is the broader area, which includes 8 census tracts that surround the city. This is important because what's happening in your town, in the city of Westminster and the outside of it, is a lot of shifting around in a suburban nature. And as we know, people are wanting to move to small towns or areas where they can have a walkable environment. And so we want to think of the context of the suburban as well as what's happening tight into the city boundaries. So we just looked at the population within Westminster and then what we call the primary market area, this PMA of these 8 census tracts, just kind of show you, okay, we've got about 20,000 people here in the city boundaries, but we've got 37,800. This and the households, there's about 7,000 in the city of Westminster, about 14,100 in the PMA. Remembering again that we understand that there are limitations to the growth based on sewer and water capacity, and that will limit us. So there's only a few places where we can grow and do infill development. So we want to be really thinking about where do we want to do that and how can we do that for the future, because other growth will be in this outer area. And how much growth is that? It's almost a doubling in size, right? There's another 7,000 households right outside us. And then we just looked at the PMA to say that, you know, Westminster's household income is a little bit lower, but that's what we would expect. In fact, this is higher than the what we would expect because it's a college town and you do have McDaniel. That's pushing down your median household income, but it's not doing it significantly. We would actually, in other locations and sizes, similar types of cities, we don't see this much of a gain. So the fact that you're at 70,000 is actually really good. Again, remembering these statistics were from before, but we have actually urged other clients to use older statistics rather than current statistics because of the shifting. So you're fortunate in that we started the project, but had done these numbers before the COVID impact. I would say that we know that the growth of McDaniel has actually done much better than many of the other local colleges and universities. If you have a great reputation, which McDaniel does, you're able to continue to grow. And so you think about like a Hopkins, which has this great reputation and is 30 miles away in Baltimore, and they've had a 7% enrollment growth during this COVID period. McDaniel's been at close to 5%, just a little under 5%. So we know that they're doing well. So we would expect, again, that those population trends we saw before COVID in terms of demographics would actually be more representative of what we're going to see in the next couple of months as we come out of COVID, and then as we recover over the next 2 or 3 years. So for office conditions, when we took a look at your office space, we're looking at, roughly 1.8 to 2 million square feet of space, very low vacancy rate of 4.5%. It was just a few buildings here and there. And really understanding from our perspective that your current office space is meeting the needs of many tenants. In fact, much of your office space is build to suit, where folks come in, I want to be in Westminster or the broader Westminster area, and so I'm going to build my own space for me, and less speculative space. There hasn't been any new construction of office space since 2012, which means that no one's coming into this marketplace and sort of looking for things. Since COVID hit, we would expect to see this increase in vacancy, and it has gone up about 2 to 3%, reaching a little more than 7% in your marketplace. But at the time of the report, it was 4.5. That again is a really healthy sign. It's still nothing that would give Anita and I cause for concern on your office front, but it doesn't suggest that you have a ton of office demand that's pent up and looking for a location necessarily in downtown. For the residential community, we took a look at just general statistics about how things were going from rental residential as well as for sale. On the rental side, you have these 1,653 rental units, and their rents really range based on the quality. It's older stock. There's nothing new that's been constructed, and it's been maintained, which is to say that it's maintaining its occupancy rates at above 95%. Again, in a college community, that's not unusual. What we see when we look at it now is that you're still, with recent projections and numbers, you're still at a very healthy occupancy rate, these 95 to 97% for individual properties. And so there's no cause for concern. During COVID, you didn't have a bunch of folks leaving, even though McDaniel did state that as opposed to having 85% of its students on campus, that was reduced to close to 65%. So they lost about 20% of those on-campus students. The actual residential multifamily properties in the community didn't have a huge hit to their occupancy. So we're not seeing folks not coming back and saying, I'm going to live where I used to live in Ohio with my parents and just go to college online. They are doing that, but they're leaving the on-campus housing. They're not impacting the private marketplace as heavily, which is another good sign for Westminster. When we look at the for sale conditions, these are a little trickier. We're looking at townhouses as well as condominium apartments. It's hard to sort of ferret out how many of the townhouses are investor townhouses where they're renting them to community, but we see a good price point of $250,000 to $360,000 for 2 up to 3 bedroom townhouse units or condominium apartments. You know, they're somewhere around $150 to $160 per square foot. I want you guys to keep that in mind, because when we start talking about the market and how much you can build to, this price point isn't quite high enough. It's a little bit low for condominiums and those types of things in terms of covering the cost of construction, which has just gone up considerably over the last couple of years and recently during the pandemic as well, when supply chains were struggling. But the sales really represent the market conditions that we're seeing in your competitive markets for townhomes. And that's where you can have a nice little downtown. So like Newmarket or Reisterstown or Owings Mills, where they are clustered near the retail and amenities and have that sort of thing. This downtown site itself would compete more for those types of things. And it is at a lower price point than those competitive communities. There just isn't any supply. For the hotel conditions, we looked at the limited supply in the Titan area. So my light purple bar here represents Westminster with its 313 official office hotel rooms. And this is built on the demand from McDaniel as well as local businesses that are drawing in folks who are like, I'm just going to camp out in Westminster. That's where the headquarters is. I might be doing sales travels into Baltimore and even west out to Gettysburg, but this is where I'm going to be. It's also where your tourism and your visitor folks are saying, hey, I'll come here because I'm going to be at McDaniel, or it's closer, it's midway between these two tourism hubs, and they have a few things that I want to do. So they may pigeon themselves here. But what you'll notice is that Owings Mills has really pushed up its supply and does have a considerable amount. It has more of the traffic from people traveling up and down 83 and other locations like that, or the Baltimore Beltway. And it has also just a closer proximity to the airport. It's just slightly closer. So it's getting a little bit more of that push. We decided to segment this review and look a little bit at the boutique hotel competition because this downtown site is such a great position. We wanted to see how those boutique competitors were doing in terms of hotel. And we took some time to kind of profile the competition, which is at just about 300 rooms itself. And we were saying to ourselves, prior to the pandemic, the competitive hotels range from, all these independent boutique types of hotels and economic hotels to upscale. They were experiencing stable to strong occupancy rates. And we think the downtown location itself, while it competes with these other options, could really penetrate the market for a boutique offering and could support a new hotel. And this is where we were sort of saying, we're going to take a little bit of the boutique demand and we're going to take some of McDaniel demand and this business demand and be able to build sufficient demand to support a new hotel in the marketplace. So for the commercial office options, we decided for each option to give you 3 options in addition. So for each alternative, we kind of said, what are the best and worst case ways to build this out? And so for the office options, we did 2 4-story buildings and a 3-story building, but all of the options, we included a small ground floor retail space. And this is because enlivening and really engaging the space at your main and main is going to be very critical. And we didn't want anyone to lose sight of the fact that that was a necessary component. So significant office development in general really requires an anchor tenant. So it's an institution, a government, somebody like that when you don't have the demand. This is why the build to suit has been what you've predominantly seen successfully in Westminster. So we would like to see that office space be filled with firms that are within the Westminster market, presumably companies that have a vested interest already. Would there be any of those that might want to locate to downtown? Are there other sites, which there may be, which they could backfill or fill in as well? And what would be those options? So we looked at a range based on the site configuration and also just how much could we really support of about 26 to 29,000 square feet of total development, which was costing about $225 to $232 per square foot gross dollars. So this allowed us in the financials to really play with the rents and to say, you know, how many rents can we get and how much can we do? For parking for office space in a small downtown community like this, a 1.6 parking ratio is probably not enough. But we know that the city itself has supplemental parking that's offsite, that's a couple blocks away. And we weren't too hesitant. We know that that won't be desirable, but it would be doable and reasonable, especially if you felt like the amenities of the space with a new building would be something that you couldn't get elsewhere in a downtown environment. And so this is sort of the program that we looked at for the office. For the residential, we looked at, again, 3 scenarios of 4-story rental, as well as a 3-story rental. And then we looked at a for sale option. Now, this is a little bit trickier because the footprints of the space kind of grow based on how much of the space I'm taking up, how much of the parking I'm assuming I have to capture off site. But the development program reflects that 10-year option for sale and rental because you guys have an unproven condominium markets, and condominiums, let's face it, make Anita and I just a little bit nervous. We don't mind them when they're in a small scale project like this, but it does kind of make us a little bit nervous because you could end up with investors who are purchasing them and not spending the money and renting them out to college students. And then it just becomes a derivative of what we already have in the rental model and not necessarily giving the city something that it can control as well. And so all alternatives use this parking ratio of 1 space per unit because we want to look at how to push that. And so we have a total number of units that are there, and then how many spaces we could really fit on the site. Again, parking ends up being a really big cost. And so it's how many can we tuck under, how much can we structure this and build those into the options and alternatives. And so these are the 3 alternatives that we looked at there. And then for the hotel option, again, it was between the 4-story and the 3-story. But what we did was we did one option without anything other than just the hotel, assuming that the hotel itself has a lobby entrance that would be activated. This is the one place where we allowed you not to have a retail option. It's going to be up to the boutique operator, but when you're talking about a boutique hotel, they are addressing their audience based on service. And so because they're service focused, usually they will enliven that first floor space, and that might be a small type of gym, exercise area. It might just be where they greet the guests, but they offer concierge services. And you can get this coupon if you go to this restaurant in downtown and those types of things, and they'll activate that space to some degree. It's probably the only option where we said, okay, you don't have to also mix in some retail on the first floor. And that's really not because the retail is providing such a financial gain, but because the retail is so critical to your main street and maintaining and keeping that main and main activated. So again, we looked at alternatives between the 3- and 4-story rooms. We're talking about 45 to 70 rooms. And that's about averaging about 350 square feet per room. It's got some on-site surface parking, but in some options that might just be parking for a few folks and then a valet person who's going to take your car to the parking lot across the alley or some other option. All retail customers and employees are expected to park off-site or use the on-street, metered parking lots for options that don't provide at least 1 space per parking room, because we know that this parking was the pinch. We kind of built it into the financials as several of our options. So for the conclusions, obviously the office development resulted in a request for subsidy. Now, the reason for this is just that you should be aware that the current rental rates are close, $18 to $22 per square foot is what folks are getting right now. And we had to build to $34. So your market rents for your office space had to come up substantially to cover that cost of construction. And so it's a higher risk option. It's really unlikely to achieve the rent of the $34 per square foot. Should you guys get somebody who comes in and says, I'm an institutional or an anchor tenant and I desire space in downtown, and I'm really willing to pay a premium for that long-term commercial or office space, it could become a viable alternative. The market itself does not warrant speculative office development. You need somebody who's occupying 70% of that building. And so an institutional user or a government entity would have to make it within their budget to pay a market price that would subsidize it. So you're looking for basically a tenant subsidy initially. So you're talking about a gap of 2.8 to 2.2 million. We don't think this is the way to go, obviously, on this site. It's too big of a gap, and it's assuming that you're giving the land away for free. Not that you guys necessarily need this property to generate revenue, but I'm not sure that the activation of the space with office, again, office doesn't go into the evening as late. It's definitely during COVID, we've seen a downward trend that was happening prior to COVID in terms of people sharing space and working from home. I think this would be the exceptional location for office space in terms of already having sort of the restaurants and a little bit of the retail and sort of the environment that might be attractive to people who are still remaining in office space, but it is a big leap to be spending that much more. And so if you're not going to be in Baltimore and you're not going to be in Gettysburg or these other locations, are you going to be willing to spend that kind of money? For the housing with the retail options that we looked at, we did see a very big gap between the options. And I want to be clear that that's because if you're going to own this, you're going to want a lot of higher end finishes, and the cost to build is just going to be higher. So your 4-story condo is going to have to cover a lot of open space and area, a lot of common area, as well as just the higher end finishes and furnishings that you wouldn't have in a rental building. The rental will reinvest in itself in replacement of those fixtures and furnishings, but it's not going to be quite as nice as what we'd expect for a condominium. So when we looked at this option, we did see that it was close to being reasonable. You go from about 10.5 million down to 5.3 million if you really tighten your belt, so to speak. And I think that Anita and I still believe that the multifamily might be something for you guys to consider. We don't want to say that it's not an option. The problem was the parking. And so when we coupled the cost of the above grade parking with the high cost of construction right now, it just made it not financially viable. And so you can see you've got a gap of roughly, $600,000, a little more than $500,000 on that 3-story rental option where we really trimmed it down as much as possible. And that's still a big gap. And then on the condominium, 7.4 million or 1.2 million on the 4-star options. The for sale option really just shows it's an unproven marketplace, and it was hard on the site itself to fit in enough, and the parking was enough of a constraint that we kind of ran out of the ability to sell them for enough money to be able to cover those high costs. For the hotel, here it was a different story. Anita and I were looking at a couple different options, and we actually were fortunate that we had reviewed some financials of more of a standard, less of a boutique, but more of a what I'd call a mid-scale hotel operation that was right at 100 rooms. And I'd reviewed a couple of those that were actually the one that was opening in your competitive marketplace. I can't really say which one because that's confidential. But in that instance, we looked at their numbers and what their expected occupancy rate would be and how they were functioning. And they were able to make a substantial return. We were more conservative on our estimates for the boutique, but the boutique option offers really the greatest near-term potential for commercial redevelopment of the site. It's particularly true when you consider the first floor retail and the potential uses of the nearby parking lots and some sharing. In fact, when you shrink down the square footage, you get these 3-story building, you don't get the return that you do. So the 4-store option is really the option that's probably most desirable. That's closer to 70 some odd rooms, depending upon how much of the retail space. And we would probably recommend that you would push for retail on that first floor or allow the boutique operator to help you sort of suggest that, because it would enliven this, again, corner of Main and Main so critically. It's really positioned well in the marketplace, but I would like to just add this caution. Obviously, with the COVID, we recommended you guys take a pause on this because we know nobody would touch it. We don't want to spend your money unnecessarily. We've done this work, we've gotten you to this point, and we just said, let's hold on. Reaching out to hotel developers that we have over the last couple of months and on a couple different projects, we've seen them really pulling it in. I don't want to do anything risky. I'm struggling as it is. I don't want to stretch myself to get another project or another property. And the only places where they're still sort of staying engaged and watching the properties and saying, okay, I'll come back to that one is in a couple of years. So I think Anita and I have heard sort of a hold for 2 years to make decisions about acquisition and moving forward development. Part of it has to do with just getting access to that capital, and the underwriting standards have remained stable if you're a proven builder. But in the boutique market, it's a little bit more about, I'm suffering now my other properties, so I don't want to jump to a new one and take on that burden right now. I'm using the money that I would have used to do that to keep my other ones afloat because I know the market's going to come back even stronger. We think the recovery of McDaniel College, remember, I talked about their enrollment being strong, but their activities, all of those folks returning to campus, which brings parents who are driving them there and dropping them off and is the visitor demand, are the pieces of the puzzle that you're waiting for to sort of hit the best time to do the deal. Now, it isn't to say that if you put it out right now, you wouldn't get a few nibbles or bites. It's just to say that you probably get a better offer once they start to see the recovery of their other assets that they currently have in that place, because you want a proven boutique operator. Anita, I'm going to open it up to you to add any final remarks on anything I missed, and then I think we could just spend some time doing some Q&A.
Yeah, I think the only thing is that clearly the parking is a major issue. The cost of structured parking is not something that the market would support. So the constraints are related to how much can you accommodate in surface parking and how amenable are your users to parking a block away, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that helped drive the framing of the options and the results as well. So.
Thanks, Anita.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very informative. I will open it up then to my committee members for questions. So if you wish to be recognized, please say so. Mr. President, you are recognized.
Thank you. So, Abby, one of the things we talked about when we were with you all the last time we were actually together, over a year ago, I guess, was that we were willing to go to 5 stories. And I was wondering if you thought about, I mean, you talked a lot about 3-story and 4-story options. Did you, are 5-story options? Okay, are they
I just
like,
ran out of room with the parking. It was the parking, and I pushed it as often as I could. Now, again, I wasn't designing it for as I'm not a designer, but we pushed it. We actually have some 5-story options, but they were not. I had to build structured parking, so then I shrunk everything down, so I lost my revenue stream.
So
it makes it less viable.
Yeah, if we do when you talk about structured parking, is the cost of doing structured parking so prohibitively high that to do something like like to go underground, do a story or 2 underground, is that?
Right. So I did so this is a great question, Greg. I did some tuck under options. So I tucked into the back of if you can imagine, I did. And of course I don't draw these things, but I tucked into the back of the building. In some instances, I even took advantage of the tiny bit of slope that you had. So I squeezed as many of those, what are less expensive spaces, they're more expensive than surface, in to the model as I could. And then I just was forced to go off site. And so when I went off site, then I assumed that you'd get like a holistic, like we're purchasing these kind of like valet companies do rentals to do those options, and tried to see how much of those I could get. I would say that because the hotel has guests coming and going at varying times, they sort of have like a checkout, everybody leaves and everybody comes. They don't have that ability to share really well with a ton of other users. Now, we do know that the hospitality industry itself, with people taking Uber and different things like that, there has been a reduction in the demand for vehicles for hotels. And so they are willing. So we did push that envelope as well as much as we could, but the structured parking is really what limited us. I would say, however, you could suggest when you put out the solicitation or encourage when you select a development team that they build up to 5 stories in the front and taper back down, just to give you that more presence and that kind of appeal on the corner, in the same way that we recommended you do more retail. I don't think it's not cost prohibitive to build to the 5 stories in terms of doing the concrete platform and then going up. You can even, so you can get to the 5 without an issue in terms of the cost side of it. It's the structured parking piece behind it. And then that begs the question too, if you have the parking, which you already have, is a municipal lot behind it.
Well,
If there's ability to add to that site.
that was going to be my next question. So,
Yeah.
so we have, the
You have
parking
that
garage that's adjacent to this site.
Mhm.
And, I guess, and I'm not, sort of current with how we have those spaces allocated. Some of them have to be allocated to the condominiums that are,
Right.
attached to the front. But some of them are public spaces,
Right.
which of course, we hate to give up public spaces because we have restaurants in the area that use those. But at the same time, if we were to do something like that, we could factor that in, and that would just being just sort of across the alley, so to speak, would that be a detriment?
No, that would be hugely helpful. And I think the parking question is one that Anita and I wrestled with a good bit. And I think that from our perspective, parking is one where there used to be that if you build it, they will come kind of mentality about, access those things. We're not sure that you guys aren't in a position where your parking is underutilized because it's a little bit, it needs to be updated and modernized. We worked with some really good firms who do, are able to help cities, smaller cities, kind of struggle with that. And it might be time for you guys to consider looking into that. I don't know how many of you are staying on and how many of you are leaving. And if the new mayor is here on Facebook and she's hearing me, not because you want to, it's not necessarily that we want to make this all about auto, because I do think other modes of transportation will come into play, scooters and other things like that will definitely, other modes of transportation and access points will be good, but maybe it's a way of figuring out where you might have some hidden gems in terms of access, and you can squeeze in more parking spaces or more flexibility in that parking, that it shifts to scooter or bike or another mode that's more sustainable. I just think that we have to think about parking as already being in the built environment and something that we can reuse and restructure to get us the highest and best use. And so it may be time for Westminster, and if I were queen for a day, I might start looking into parking more heavily, because this site really hinged more on the parking than I would have anticipated, knowing that I had a municipal lot behind me and one across the street and down the road, and I still couldn't quite make it work. So I would urge you guys to look at that next.
Just to give you
Meeting.
a sense of perspective, an underground space probably costs about $35,000 per space. And even an above ground space would be $20,000. So those are big numbers when you start to layer them on a project like this. And that's why we tried some of them in the models, but it just didn't work.
Right. And those are numbers that are probably low too, because of the
It could
cost
be,
right
yeah,
now.
it
They
depends,
probably
yeah.
And I do think, and Anita and I did another project years ago where we looked at taking structures and adding levels to them. And there is some question in my mind about how the structure was currently built behind you or your other structures. Do you have capacity to add another level? Do you have, are there missed capacities in that regard too? There might be information you have somewhere in the archives of the city's archives
Mr.
about
Glass,
those.
our public works director is on the call there, and I don't know if he's listening in, but when we built these originally many years ago, I recall that there was a lot of discussion about creating the ability to add on to the 2 garages. And I'm not sure if that was for both or just one, or if we actually wound up doing that or not. Mr. Glass, do you recall, what we did on that?
Yes, sir. Longwell Garage is the one that was designed for additional levels. Westminster Square was not, because of its attachment to the condominium structure there. So unfortunately, I think in this case, it would be better if that were flipped the other way, but I don't think that's the case this time.
Well, yeah, it might be better, but if there's another space where you free up, and again, I didn't do a parking assessment, but I think that you could get some folks to come in and they could probably say, well, yeah, but if you freed up down here, then I can shift these other spaces and these restaurants won't need as many, and then you could give it to the other user. So. And again, remembering in my analysis, I assumed that the retail and the restaurants that were in that space would sort of filter out to the other on-street parking options.
We've got lots of parking. It's just a couple of blocks away.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking. And people don't mind, people mind walking that far. Certainly they do, but not in you're at your main and main. You've got such a pleasant street, such a nice walking environment. It's a really nice pedestrian environment. I'm sure you won't stop investing in that as a city anytime soon, and that will continue to spur it. So we were not, I mean, again, we were much more aggressive on the parking than we would have been in any other location. I can think of only one other client that I might be this aggressive with, because you already have that appeal here. So they'll be willing to walk for the parking.
But it's the difference between the kind of user, if you're here
the
for
hotel-
dinner, a couple of blocks is not a problem. If it's your home, that's going to be more of a resistance point.
Right. And
Yeah.
if it's hospitality, they're going to accommodate by having a valet who will shift it over there for you. And that's going to shift that demand. That's the other reason I think that the hospitality was a little more appealing too, was on that end as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Mayor, you got anything? Or?
I mean, the question I was going to ask is the ability to add to the parking garage. Because I think we had a recent meeting. Was it Public Works? I guess we were talking about some issues, fixing some issues in the garage, and that came up. But I thought it was both garages. So Mr. Glass handled that one. But I got excited. I thought there was an opportunity to add a level to that. So I guess I'll quell my excitement. Although, parking is an area that we've talked about a lot. So we were just talking about it at our last council meeting. So we probably need to talk about it a little bit more.
So
I don't have anything specific to this. I think so far everything, the information was it's good. A little eye-opening, at least in terms of the cost of each parking spot. I didn't know an underground parking spot was so expensive. It makes sense. I'd like to think that it won't take 2 years for people to start looking into the future. It takes a while to build a hotel. So I think the use of the hotel would be quite some time out. I'd hope that lending and development would be able to make moves prior to that. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, there was Barb asked us, she checks in with us from time to time. We were like, wait, don't call us yet. And then this one, I thought, it's probably at this point we need to look at it. And obviously we just checked the statistics to see that we were still within the same range in terms of market conditions. But we have another site that's really awesome site and has some hospitality potential and has slightly better numbers than you guys, but it's a different position. It's a more of a flagship location. So like 225 rooms, and it's, if you're ready, it's just as ready or a little more ready, just a smidgen more. And we can't get nibbles on it for another 2 years. And so it's, it's just the pandemic uncertainty, and hotels are just the most volatile. And because, we expect business travel to come back up, we expect all the convention and meeting stuff. Nothing suggests that those things aren't going to turn around this fall a little bit at a time. The problem is just that they don't want to stretch themselves to another place when they've lost so much money over the last year.
And
So
a lot of-
the issue isn't necessarily their forecast. It's just the funding
Their
side.
asset.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't think that Westminster would be a location for you don't want somebody new trying to figure out how to do boutique in there. You want a proven person. And so those proven people just took a hit. And in any other industry, they might have, even McDaniel, for example, has good news. They didn't take as big of a hit in enrollment as other colleges, but hospitality across the board took the hit. So,
Mhm. And there'll probably be some period of time where the investment goes to buying existing hotels.
right, that have faltered.
Yeah, that have had
That's the other
troubles.
thing. Good
Yeah.
point, Anita. Yeah.
Um,
That'll happen first. Low hanging
Well,
fruit.
so Mr. Mayor, did you need
Hold
to
on. Yep.
have anything else? Okay, all right. If I could make maybe a couple comment or actually a couple questions. So I heard parking a lot in this last 10 minutes. And so we as a city had discussed allocating funding for a comprehensive parking study for the next fiscal year. Would you agree that having that, done, and then, 2 years down the line when we start to solicit it, you would agree that that would probably be an attractive thing to have when soliciting bids for this?
Yeah, and it'll
would that
also
be
make
an
it,
accurate
it'll also
statement?
make a difference in your events and your public stuff that you're gonna try to, you're gonna continue to do outdoor and events and public stuff until you'll have the parking data, but the person who's doing the parking will be measuring that as well. So in there, again, assuming you get a reputable firm, but I'm sure you guys will, you get somebody good, they're gonna also estimate that. And so that will be great because that's just like marketing material for the hotel, right? Oh, here's all the
Right.
events we have and the people we draw in that are from, they might not say how many of them are from out of the area, but they may just give an estimate of the cars that are coming in and they can make some assumptions off of that. So it's just more for the hotel piece. I don't know that it would hinder the multifamily or help it because that is your other viable option. But I think it would definitely help the hotels. It would be supplemental. So yes, Ben, you're right on track with that.
Okay.
I have
Second,
one thing, Mr. Chair.
yeah, go ahead,
So,
Mr. Mayor.
I know we are discussing other options. I think that by far my preference is a hotel. I think the colleagues are in agreement. I don't know. They shook their head yes. So I guess the question is, I understand that we'd have to wait a couple years before we can really make a move on it. But is that still a pretty bullish outlook on your part? If we wait those 2 years, that the hotel is really a very good and viable option, and we'll be able to find the right person to do it when the time is up.
I think it's still a viable option. I think it will still be a viable option. The one thing that Anita and I can't predict if somebody decides to open something in Newmarket or another close by place and sort of beats you to the demand, then it's just going to make it a little bit harder. But again, because it's in the boutique realm and because the site size wouldn't allow you to go more than 70 some odd rooms, that's unlikely to occur. So with that site that I was talking about, where I said it was almost as ready, but it was more like 250, that was my big warning to them is if somebody else beats you to the punch, then you're in trouble. With you guys, it's not as much of a concern because you're in the boutique market. The size of it isn't going to be hitting where other people are coming in. And so you won't be running into that problem. Anita, did you want to say anything else about that in terms of, no?
Well, I think, that to the extent that you're a travel related
Yeah.
facility and not one driven by conventions or anything like that, you'll probably be in the segment of the hotel market that recovers more quickly. It's where we're looking at the major conventions and large meetings that we're thinking that people are going to be more reluctant to travel. And so that will take longer to recover. So the smaller ones that are oriented to individuals and leisure travel probably will recover more quickly. So I think it is still a good option.
Okay, go ahead. My final question is, and Greg, please feel free to chime in here because you have a lot more experience with this area of the Town Center Corporation or whatever it was called. Okay. What benefits do you see? So the Town Center Corporation, I believe, was like a public-private partnership. Greg, if you want to help me out after I'm done. I guess my question is, I think that there is interest from this committee and future the candidates for council have expressed interest in utilizing that vehicle in this development process, and what might that look like? And Greg, please feel free to chime in
Yeah,
there.
just for a little more background. So years ago, the city created something called the Westminster Town Center Corporation, which was, a sort of, I don't know what the correct, legal description of it is, but it was a body. The board included, 3 representatives of the city, 4 members of the public, so that it wasn't controlled by the city, so that it could, retain a certain status. And it was a opportunity to receive funds that the city couldn't receive directly, from different types of grants and things like that. But we were also able to use it for other things too. And one of the things that we did when we marketed the property sort of next door to what we're talking about here, where the old stone building is.
Yeah.
What we did was, after the city had purchased that property, and we were, it became complicated for the city to handle it itself. We turned that property and the procurement of, a tenant or somebody to take it over and buy it to the Town Center Corporation. And we used the Town Center Corporation as an easier way to manage that. And we also, had at the time given the Town Center Corporation managed to get some funding, that was able to help them, be able to do some things. So we've used it for a variety of purposes, and we've still sort of got it. And we haven't used it for some years now, but it still exists. And, we've been talking a lot in the last, couple of years about reviving it and finding, some of these types of uses for it again. Is that a tool that's useful in this situation?
I mean, if it's got money.
It doesn't really have much money attached to it anymore. So,
It doesn't have very much
Not
money.
yet.
Yeah.
Money can go to it, obviously, but
I mean, this is a site where my understanding is you've actually had some interim uses use the site. I've forgotten now what Barb told us was using
Well,
the.
the city's using it mostly right now. I think
Yeah.
we're staging different things out of it. So it's got some usefulness to it, obviously, even while we're not doing
Because
what we
keeping
want
it
to do.
used and active as a potential, like a temporary urbanism kind of site might not be a bad idea, so that we can continue it, because it's such a critical corner. And if the Town Center Corporation could be the financial person who would help support that, temporary uses, and then just somebody who is working, not even maybe a third of the time, not even just part-time, but a city staff person would be, looking over the shoulders and making sure it's programmed and it's keeping activated and it's being shared when necessary at large events and stuff. That would be good, because it would just keep activity going and cycling through that and become, problematic. Anita, I don't know. The problem is that the corporation itself, I'm not sure, other than to support the temporary piece, I'm not sure what other position it would hold. Anita, are you?
Yeah, I mean, without the local banks and everything being involved, it's not quite as powerful as maybe it was at one time.
Right.
And those were some of
Yeah.
the members back in the day, yeah.
Right, but it's, I guess a lot of it is the question of control and whether you want that control to stay with the city, or you see problems with political influences on it where you want to be more arm's length. That's a lot of the argument for doing an independent development corporation.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not sure you need it almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
To some degree, I'm not sure you guys, here's what I would say. To some degree, I'm not sure you need the Town Center Corporation. You might have needed it at one point in time. I'm not sure you need it right now. However, if it has a little bit of money left over and we've got this, 18 to 36 month period before you're putting out the solicitation, why not take advantage of what you can and get it to do that? Anita and I've seen some real successes with temporary urbanism and other small, just to activate and getting people out to doing different things. But, often what folks say is that they don't have the wherewithal of their staff or people to manage that, because it's a management, a programmatic side to it. So maybe there's some way that this semi-defunct corporation could step in. I don't know. I don't want to, I haven't read its charter and I don't know what its limitations are, but that would be a way to use it and use any money, kind of seeing it as a gap fix for now. But Anita's right about the control question. I'm not sure.
So the reason I brought this up is I look at, so the county has an entity which is called the Industrial Development Authority.
Mhm.
And I believe the way it functions is the county grants money to that authority, and then the authority has developed, specific industrial property. And
Right.
I looked at Town Center Corporation, was like, okay, could that fit in here? And I guess what I'm hearing is the
Oh.
answer is maybe.
Maybe as a temporary use. The county's EDA or
IDA.
Whatever it is.
sorry about that, EDA. IDA is going to be very specific. You wouldn't want to be the developer of this site, obviously, for a boutique user. They would want to come in and do it themselves.
I mean, the IDA's
that makes-
function, the IDA's function largely on providing financing with tax exempt bonds for
Tax-
industrial prospects. They have, I don't know Maryland law very well in that regard, but there
They
have
tie
been
it to the-
cases where IDAs can do other commercial kinds of
Right.
activities that are
Okay,
fixed
No, that
assets.
I understand. I know that there was.
I don't know that I've never seen the IDA go into a hotel though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I
have.
wasn't
Yeah.
suggesting that they have.
Oh,
I guess
okay.
Yeah.
More
Right.
that my thought process is, we, and I think I speak on behalf of the committee, is that, we want this site to be attractive to a developer because we
Yeah.
recognize the value. So, the city, I think would, I would hope in the future would like to, make it attractive in whatever ways possible, So
Mhm.
anyways,
Yeah,
I won't
you're not
belabor,
wrong.
I won't belabor that point. I'll just kind of get to the ending here. First, I'll ask if Mr. Mayor or Mr. President, if you would like to have any more questions or comments on this.
So I guess my only question, or it's sort of both, is that we'll see you guys in another year and a half or so, right?
Yeah,
To continue this conversation.
sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you guys for being, your staff and for everyone being so flexible about all of this. We've been, we don't have a ton of clients right now that we've been saying, don't call us till we call you. You're one of the few that we were like, we're just going to be honest with them. We don't want them, we don't like to waste time or money, that's just not in our DNA. But this project in particular, we were so upset about COVID hitting because we thought, no, they were so close, we could see it, and then it just sort of slipped back. And from my
So,
view, yeah.
so if I could ask the committee members, I'd like to propose, when I report the council meeting, I'd like to propose 3 recommendations. The first one is that, barring any unforeseen market conditions or unforeseen circumstances, that the strategy for this site is a boutique hotel. All right. The second is that we will continue to, certainly I can't project future budgets, but, that we would recommend continuing to engage partners for economic solutions in this process. And then the third would be to recommend that we reinstate the parking study on the capital budget if we can figure out how the funds are there. That would be my 3 recommendations to our council, and I'd like to get your all's blessing on that. So.
Well, I'm Mr. Chairman, I'm certainly totally in agreement with suggestions 1 and 2. I think we've all agreed that there's a tremendous need for a good hotel in Westminster. I think it's a great opportunity on this site. And I think, clearly from what our consultants have been able to tell us today, it seems to be the most viable option, of all the ones that were considered. So I think that makes a lot of sense. On option 2, I'm very pleased, obviously, with the relationship we have with PES. I think they're doing a great job for us, and we'll hope to revisit with them for the next chapter in this discussion when that time is appropriate. On the third one, I don't disagree that we will need to do the parking study. I just, as a budgetary matter, as chair of the finance committee, I don't want to, I mean, I sort of think, there should be a placeholder for it in the budget, but temporarily, in order to get us over this hump of having a balanced budget, in the next couple of weeks, I think we need to take that out and then put it back, within the next couple of months, as we are able to, make some of these other adjustments, that we're going to be able to make, when this federal money comes in. So, I agree that we need to do the parking study. I also agree that we're going to want to do, the other things Ms. Matthews told us that, some of this money was earmarked for updating our meters, things like that. That's all got to happen, and it's going to happen in this coming fiscal year, I expect. But, I think that this is the most convenient chunk of money to satisfy the other need that we have that will get us over the hump. So as somebody who's going to be, I guess the only one of the three of us is going to be sticking around, past, the reorganization of the council in a few weeks, I'm happy to give you my commitment to get that done, to make it to get all that back, into the city's budget. But we're going to have to wait a couple of months to do that.
Mr.
Well,
Mayor.
I mean, I largely agree with all of that. I think this definitely, made the parking study a little more front and center in terms of importance, for sure. And here's the other thing too. Like, I'd like to take a look. We were kind of shooting from the hip at the last meeting. We brought up two pieces where we could pull that from to make what we wanted to work. There's probably other places we could pull that from if that made everyone more comfortable. But like, I don't know that. I just know that we kind of, we were pulling from memory of two things where there was a chunk of money. We weren't sitting there, with hours to analyze that. So I'd like to look at that and see what options we have. I don't want to
an alternative,
because I'm fine. Like, that's the thing. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with number 3, but I don't want the two pieces that we were trying to get in terms of pay to be what suffers from that. So I guess the question is, like, what is it being switched with? So
Okay.
but yeah, like, I'm largely in agreement with, in terms of 1 and 2, we all agree on that. Number 3, like, I get it. I'm on board depending on what we're switching it with. But
So my recommendation then would be that we seriously reopen the discussion of allocating funding for the parking meter, for the parking study. So that is what we'll do, if that's okay. And then, no, I appreciate Mr. Pecker or Greg on your commitment, but this is definitely tied to, I think, the success of this redevelopment. Clearly, that the experts have made that case. So, okay, very good. Well, look, Anita, Abigail, I'm just like, I'm so excited, to hear this. I'm so disappointed that we have to wait 2 years, but good things come to those who wait. So look
It might
forward.
be 2 years, maybe things will
Right.
move faster.
A year,
Yeah.
we'll see. But look forward to hearing about it as a resident and registered voter, not a elected official. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Okay, next on the agenda, we've got the attorney. So I believe it is the Be Kind. I don't have the agenda in front of me. So the Be Kind initiative. I think you're on mute.
Hi. So good morning. You all have had conversations with this entity that I haven't had. So to some extent, you have more information about the nature of the initiative than I have. But when it was on your agenda for public discussion, I had some concerns about it. It just struck me as being a problem because you're granting access to public assets to a for-profit entity that other entities don't have the same access to. And it's coming to you through somebody who has an existing contract with the city And so the whole thing just made me a little uncomfortable. And the specific provision of the ethics ordinance that made me uncomfortable is the using of your office for the gain of another entity. So I think that this could fall within the prescriptions of that section of the ethics ordinance. So again, I don't know all of the details of the arrangement and whether in fact, was your anticipation that this entity was going to sort of pay for the use of the right of way in the nature of a franchise agreement. I don't know, but I just wanted to bring to you, not in a public session, my concerns about the arrangement.
Okay, well, any comments on that? I think that's pretty straightforward.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Pecoraro.
thank you. So I recognize, what our attorney has said, that, there are certainly, some challenges involved in this. It's clearly not the intent of anybody, I think, associated with this, certainly on the council, mayor and council side, and I very much doubt on the side of the Infinite Love project to do anything that's unethical, or that would constitute an unethical use of the city's, prestige or our office or anything like that.
I know,
But at the same
I'm sorry,
time-
wasn't implying any.
I didn't think you
intent.
were. I never thought you were. I'm just saying, I just wanted to make that statement that as we go into this, I think that that's clearly not, anybody's intent to do anything like that. Now, however, I think that, this is an initiative that has gained a lot of traction in the community. And I think it's a nice idea to be associated with it, for the city, if we can figure out a way to do that. And I say that, partly because I think it represents, sort of an ethic, or a concept that I think, is much in need in our society these days. And it also, sort of from a very personal standpoint, it reminds me of, when I was growing up, my father was a school principal here in the county. And, every memo, every letter he sent out into the community to his staff, he closed everything with "be kind." And so as soon as I saw these signs popping up around town, it made me immediately think of my dad and his doing that. Because it really was a big catchphrase of his as he dealt with the communities that he was working in. And, and it just, so to me, it has a sort of a powerful evocation of that memory. And I think it's something that we'd all benefit from seeing more often. As I drive around the community, I see the "Be Kind" signs in all kinds of places. Some of them, are, maybe, certainly people's homes and businesses and places like that. I also see it probably in some places where, it's probably not strictly legal to have them, like, on telephone poles and things like that. But nobody seems to mind those the way they do campaign signs that are stuck illegally in the public right away. But so anyway, I just think that it's something that sort of grew here in Westminster. It's becoming something that we are being known a little bit for, and I'd like to find a way to associate the city with this idea. So I don't know what the right way to do that is. As always, I value guidance from our council on sort of in saying, here's where we'd like to go, what's the right way to get there, as opposed to ways that we can't do it. So I'm open to ideas on that.
So I would say that you could certainly adopt a resolution endorsing the program, and it feels like they're already getting signs up and getting notoriety without you sort of licensing city property for it. So you could certainly adopt a resolution endorsing it. You could, you can't allow them preferential use to post signs because on light poles and things, because that's a First Amendment problem. You are very likely opening up yourself to a contention that you've turned the light poles into public fora where people can, stick signs and, concert notices and all the stuff.
So
that
the
you all
alternative would
over.
be for people to post signs that say "be mean," and we're against that.
No, you can't, so when you're talking about signs, the court made very clear a couple years ago, in a case brought against the town of Gilbert in Arizona, I think, that if the question involves assessing what the sign says at all, then you have intruded into First Amendment territory. You can regulate the size, place, manner of signs, but you cannot regulate the content at all. So you can't just say it's, public service messages.
What if the city purchased a couple of dozen signs and put them up itself and said, we just want to encourage people to be kind to each other?
You could do
not-
that. You could do that, I think. I'm not seeing such an objection to that. Right, and that's going to be a public transaction, right? You're gonna put the purchase of these signs on the agenda. So yeah, you can, if you deem the fostering of this message as a public purpose, which I certainly think is not outside the realm of the possible, you can certainly spend city funds on that.
So I guess my concern coming into this wasn't exactly the same. Mine was if we align with a private organization and we somehow align with whether it be a slogan, motto, whatever you want, tagline, and people talk about adopting that for the city. We don't have control of that message and branding, and we should be careful about that. And being careful, I don't know what that means. Certainly, we also don't want to hamstring the business either, right? So if we tell them we'll do this, but you can't do X, Y, and Z in terms of your own branding. We don't want to limit them in the future. So because they have different themes. It's all around the Be Kind. And I mean, look, we could do some cool stuff with Be Kind and Be City. I think the actual business owner mentioned that, but it's been in my head ever since they mentioned, we talked about it. There's definitely some good stuff, and I totally support what they're doing. I think it's really cool how it's taken off and everything. And I like that it's associated with Westminster, but once we officially make some kind of agreement or endorsement or resolution, we're tied to it. And whatever they do, we're tied to that. And there's a whole lot of gray area of stuff that a lot of people think is okay. There's going to be a lot of stuff they could do that I could think is perfectly fine that other residents or elected officials might not like, so that was my real concern really, is that if you align yourself with some sort of logo saying branding that's really controlled by some other entity, you're kind of just, you're in the wind wherever they go, you're kind of going with them. So that was really my whole thing, was how can we, be protected from that or have some kind of say or control in that. And I mean, in my mind, there's no real way of doing that very well with a private company. But that was really, when I voiced my concern, that was it. It's kind of like why they don't name cars after people anymore. You don't know what that person's going to do. So the DeLorean's the most famous car in the world, and we all know what happened there. So not that we think that's going to happen with Be Kind. I'm just making a comment that it's a private entity, and if we align with it, we're aligned with it. So
I tend to agree with the mayor, but I see Councilman Pecororo's points. About the purchasing of the signs. I mean, I certainly spreading that message, I think is a great thing. I guess I feel that, at least from my position, I'm probably a little uncomfortable making any decision really on this right now. And I'd probably just yield to the next council if they'd like to align or not align or pass a resolution, or, probably they'll make that decision. So,
Mr. Chair, I think for me, I'm not even really sure what we want to do with it. Like, I don't know where everyone's at with it. I guess that's really the problem is, some people have talked about making it like our new tagline for the city. Other people, there's all these, like, I think there's like a spectrum of what people have discussed. So I don't know really what we're trying to decide what we can or cannot do with it yet. So, cause I mean, like, what Greg said about purchasing signs and like being supportive and kind of doing it that way. Like, I might have zero issue with that. I think that's a great idea. And we're not tied to them any other way other than they're a vendor at that point, and we're supporting a local business. They're a vendor, and we like what they have as a product. But anything past that, I'm not necessarily against it. I think it just needs further discussion and thought about what that could mean, going down the road. That's all. So, I mean, I like what Greg's talking about. I just, anything past that, I don't know. I just don't know where everyone's at. Like, we have a whole council of people that probably have a different idea what they're thinking with this. And, there's no like one idea, I think, that we nailed down that we're discussing. So I'm not really sure.
So would it make sense then to maybe, like, when I report out, is to recommend that, the next council or who be kind of involved in the breadth of that discussion is, okay, like, what is the vision for this relationship or non-relationship? Would that be amenable to the committee?
Well, yeah, I certainly, I mean, I understand, Mr. Chairman, your thought that, it's, at the end of this term, maybe it makes some sense to punt this to a month down the road to the new mayor and council, to let them, because they're going to have to deal with this for the next few years. In the meantime, I mean, I think that, we could start thinking about, if we wanted to go forward, what a resolution might look like, what the parameters would be that we could legally and ethically, reasonably expect to go to. And, then we've got some sort of more concrete options, to lay before, the new elected body, so that they have some things to think about and be prepared to do this if that's their choice. So I'm happy if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, to maybe start working with Ms. Levan and anybody else on the city staff that would be appropriate to think about what this might look like. And then we'll have something, perhaps when we reorganize the council, for the new committee to review and be able to decide how it'd like to move forward.
Well, I mean, that's obviously going to be up to you. So if you all want to continue to start on, if you all want to, do that, then I mean, I'm not going to be here to even have that conversation. So that's certainly your initiative.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do that. And, we can, then, we'll see what, the new mayor and the new members of the council would like to do in this regard.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Alyssa. I don't remember what the next thing is on the agenda. I don't have it. So Barb, bail me out of this.
Sure. Jeff and I have been working with our communications consultant, Katz and Associates, and their sub consultant, Data Instincts, on branding for the water reuse initiative. And we just had some, wanted to show you what we've been working on today and get your feedback, because if we can kind of settle on the brand and the color scheme and everything, it would allow Katz to finish up doing some things like the fact sheet, and we can start building the website. So if you can give me just a minute.
May I be excused? I don't
Oh,
think.
yes, Alyssa, sorry.
No, it's fine. If you want me to stay, I will, but
I don't think you probably need to be on this part.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Alyssa. Thank you. Jeff, are you on the call? I know you had a meeting.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. So I think you may not have had a chance to look at it yet, but one of the some of the feedback we got during the water issue survey, and this will kind of tie into what we're looking at, is The community responded very positively to use of the term pure in whatever branding we were doing. So certainly all of these are some variation of using kind of the idea of Pure Water Westminster as sort of the brand for our water reuse initiative. So there's a variety of, these are kind of the 8 designs that I guess Jeff and I wanted to bring forward. So everything is some variation of Pure Water Westminster. Everything is in some shade of blue, which was something that the mayor had suggested based on his knowledge of marketing. We have 2 different taglines that we have come up with working with our consultants. Those would be reclaiming our water future and exploring water for our future. And then some of these designs have some version of a water drop. You know, some are kind of horizontal, some are more angled. But I guess we were kind of looking to get your feedback so that we could settle on kind of the brand, just so we can continue moving forward with our water reuse initiative and actually stop calling it a water reuse initiative, calling it something a little bit punchier and having a graphic and logos that people affiliate with it. Jeff, is there anything you wanted to add?
Jeff, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I guess only that we really went through
Yeah.
a number of these, and I thought it was interesting that, and the number I'll get wrong, but we've probably seen 20 or 30 different renditions of this.
Definitely.
But it was very interesting, in my opinion, that that Barb and I, and even some of the consultants as well, of these 8, there were certain ones, and I don't think we should probably hand those over to you. This is something you were looking for some input for, but they jumped out at us almost immediately. And of these 8, a number of them, certainly between Barb and I, we picked the exact same ones. So I thought that was interesting. I know very little about marketing. This is way out of my my wheelhouse, but I thought that the background and the science behind this was pretty fascinating. And for those some of those 8 to jump out and be the same picks without Barb and I talking about it at all, I thought was kind of not only interesting but pretty telling. So I'm not telling you to pick any of these 8. I'm suggesting though that boy, we have some pretty strong direction there. Just the way it turned out between Barb and I.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a really good point, because I think we easily looked at 20 or 30, possibly even more. And I'm sure, Mayor, with your background, you may have different ideas. And obviously a lot of these things can be sort of mixed and matched in terms of fonts that were used, and whether it's for the tagline or the actual brand or the logo. But we'll be, you know, we've been working on this, Jeff, for probably more than a month. Would that be
I would
fair?
say so. Yeah.
So like you say, I think there was a lot of commonality that, you know, Jeff and I came up with, and I think our consultants as well, kind of came up with a preference for some of these. So we're really just looking for the committee's feedback so we can settle on a brand sooner than later and really get going with some of the public education and information aspects of this initiative. I know Jeff is getting, and I think, Jeff, you're really close to launching the pilot project, I believe,
That's correct.
in probably the next 30, 60 days even. I
Yeah.
don't know who wants to start, Mr.
Great.
Mayor. I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
I will say this. I am not good at picking logos, and I'm not even going to try, because then I'll feel like a dummy if I don't pick the one Jeff and Barb picked. So
Actually, you're not going to go awry, because we probably agreed on 4 or 5 of the 8 that you're seeing on your screen.
look, I think this is fantastic. I'm like blown away by this. So thank you. Love Pure Water. I mean, this is just, this morning has been so good because of Stocksdale and this is great. Look, I don't have a strong preference. I mean, if the mayor thinks he's a marketing guy, if he thinks one, or if Mr. Pecoraro, you think one's good, just, I'm good with them, whatever you guys choose.
I like the ones with the drop of water and the little circular thing. I think I really like those, the best. I think maybe of those, I like the ones with the lighter blue for the drop of water as opposed to the really dark blue. It just seems a little cleaner, purer to me. I don't know, maybe this sort of goes with pure water better. So I kind of like 3 and 4. But the thing that really strikes me, and I'm good with a lot of these. Although I said I do like the drop of water there. But for the slogan at the bottom, I'm reading all these and kind of mulling them over. The thing that I just really liked the best was one that isn't here just by itself. And that is, I just like it to say water for our future, not reclaiming or exploring, but just water for our future. I think that's simpler and more direct, and it doesn't, load the rest of the statement. It's just water for our future.
Yeah, I think 2 comments on that, Greg. One, with the reclaiming our water future, it was sort of a kind of a play on water reclamation, which is what
I
this
get
is
that.
about. Yeah, so I mean, that's why we're having this discussion, is to sort of see what you all like, don't like.
So
No,
I
that's
want
just
to
my
guess.
thought.
I want to guess. Where Barb and Jeff, your favorite, was it 4?
Mine was probably, we may be a little bit different. I personally liked 1 and 8 probably. I did like 4 as well. Probably my favorite for 1, 4, and 8.
All right. I look at 4. I feel like 4 has like some mass appeal to it. So I'm gonna look at this totally different than everyone else here. Like, there are things that bother me about logos that no one else is even gonna notice. Like, I don't like it when you mix serifs with sans serifs. So there's a lot of that here. I like to either go with serifs or sans serifs and to stick with it, like stay in the same family of typography. But
we actually had a discussion about that, and Jeff and I learned something new about fonts.
Well, I mean, and in a logo too, a serif is kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't really have a purpose, but unless you're trying to make it like old timey looking. But that's something. I'm just going to look at this a little different than everybody else. I was trying to like take a step back and look at it. I think so. I like the more muted colors. I think the darker blues are better for this specific purpose. Although I do see Greg's point about pure water and being a dark water drop. But I also think that a lot of that stuff doesn't really, there's like, you can kind of pick this stuff apart, but at the end of the day, like, what's the purpose of this branding? And I think the darker colors are better. So I guess where I'm going with it is I like so Barb, you said you like 1, 4, and 8. I also like 1, 4, and 8. But I like, so one's logo is a little tougher, though. You're going to be able to use it on less places comfortably,
Right.
Just because of orientation. But you can change the orientation to a horizontal logo if you want.
Right.
But I like the colors of 1 for our 8 works too in terms of the colors. But I kind of like that. I like that slanted drop. So I like the general layout of 4.
Okay.
But that's really it for 4, because I don't like the colors as much. You're mixing serifs and sans serifs, and then you know what, Greg's tagline I think is better. It's more direct. Like, I understand like the play on words, and when you get marketers or people that do this, they like to be creative and clever, and they want to like prove their cleverness. But sometimes clever is not really like, it's not really needed for the message, and I don't think that's really the case here. I think water for our future is probably a better tagline. What do you think about that, Ben?
I kind of disagree. I like the exploring part, because it is, I mean, this is an explore. I mean, I hear you. I like the exploring part, because it really is, we are exploring. I mean, this is so new. I mean, we're the first ones doing it. That would be my only feedback, but I think I'm overruled. Like I said, I'm not gonna fight tooth and nail for this like I will the parking study.
So Joe,
In
if
all
you-
honesty, like what, if you guys feel that you like Water for Our Future better, I'm not gonna argue with you. So make the call, fellas.
So Joe, you said you liked the general layout of 4, but not the color scheme and the font. Is there a color scheme and a font?
I don't
that-
know. Honestly, I'm the worst person to look at this.
Oh, actually, I think you're
You might
probably.
think it's the
yeah.
opposite, but it's not because I mean, I don't know.
You're just picky.
What he does for a living, so.
I mean, I am with logos especially because once you're locked in with the logo, like you're locked in. Like it's really hard to change a logo. It's the hardest thing in marketing to change. So it's like, but I think really, I think at the end of the day, I like 8,
Yeah,
but with the slanted kind of like symbol portion of the logo.
I'm
okay.
good with that.
And
I like the
think
slanted
part of that's because look, it's the only serifs there are in italics, and it kind of softens them a little bit. But you could also, I would go with, if it were me, I would go with 8. I would change the tagline to what Greg said, and I would make it sans serif instead of serif. I don't think I would make it italics, but without the serifs, I think the italics would be fine. So yeah, I would do that. I think 8's probably the best choice. I would just make the thing slanted. That's my opinion.
Okay.
All
so
right,
8
done.
slanted drop, change the tagline to Water for Our Future for that. And then in the tagline, Joe, you said to drop no serifs in the tagline, correct?
Yeah, I would just get rid of the serifs. I would just change it so it matches the rest of it. Because if you look at 4, do you see how like everything goes together? Like everything fits better on 4. You should
Okay.
feel more comfortable looking at 4. Like that's one of those things where you look at it, you don't know something's wrong, but you kind of tell something is. So well, 4, I mean, because Westminster is the most natural word to have serifs. So it has serifs there, but it kind of, anyway, I would go with 8. No serifs on the bottom, change the tagline.
Okay, and do you want italics or no italics on the tagline?
I mean, not italics, I'm sorry, serifs. The italics, I'm fine with italics on the tagline.
Okay. Okay.
And what about the particular color of blue? That real dark blue, the consultant had included that because it kind of matches back to our
seal.
city seal. So there are a couple different colors of blue there. And I understand on 8 you'd like the slanted version, but you want the dark blue or one of the others?
The more dark blue in our logo, the better for this.
Okay, so basically leave 8 pretty much as it is, except for the changes, Joe, you mentioned with the drop and the tagline and the serifs.
Yep.
Okay. What is, Jeff and I can basically have the, I'll email them as soon as this meeting is over and let them know that's what the committee preferred. Are we free to go ahead? Do you want us to share this, Monday night with the entire mayor and common council, just so they at least know what the branding is going to be?
Yeah, I think so.
I would say yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, but we'll just show the one option that the committee's recommending, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Or we'll be there till like 1 a.m. discussing the logo.
That's
And I
right.
don't want to do that.
okay. We will just have available what is actually being recommended then.
Great.
I think
Well,
that,
I
Jeff,
think
that's
that
how we do it,
concludes.
right?
Yeah, I think that concludes everything. Well, as the chair, I thank all of you for your commitment over the last couple years. I feel that we really made huge strides in the economic development area. I'm really excited for the Stocksdale project and the water reuse project. And thank you to the staff, Mr. Depot, Shannon, Jeff, Barb, for making this committee a great experience. So very good. And without objection, we are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership the last 2 years.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. And yeah, Mr. Depot.
Mr. Depot
Uh-oh.
has something.
Oh gosh, what's he got?
I apologize. We had other business on the agenda.
Oh, we did. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, this just came up yesterday, actually. If you recall the last meeting, we talked about Coons and the storage of vehicles in the IR district. And we weren't really in favor of just having the IR district being the repository for car dealerships, not only in Westminster, but outside of Westminster. And we thought about the concept of maybe allowing it only for businesses in Westminster because we want to ensure they can expand and look out for them. Well, we did meet with Coons the other day, and I think they were amenable to that concept and possibly annexing into the city so then they could take
Great.
advantage of that. So we would be looking at some level of a text amendment that would allow for the satellite parking. So again, that good news in that aspect of it certainly would help the car businesses in the city. So I just wanted to give you an update on that because we did talk about that last time.
Thanks. That's good to
Yeah, I
hear.
certainly think that's a better option. So
Fantastic. There, nice work there, Mr. Depot.
Thank you.
I thought you were bringing bad news.
No bad news. Good news.
All right. Very good. Have a great day, everybody. And thank you again. We are adjourned.